All right, buckle up because we're about to take a deep dive into something pretty out there, the moon as a soul recycling center. Yeah, we're diving into this wild podcast episode called Is the Moon a Soul Recycling Center? Ancient Texts Discovered, The Earth Without a Moon, .mp3.
Definitely some intriguing stuff. We're going to be sifting through a lot of unusual theories, but that's what makes these deep dives so fun. We get to explore the fringes and see what we find.
Absolutely. And one of the things that really caught my eye right off the bat was this idea of a moonless Earth way back in ancient times.
Yeah.
It's like you've got all these texts from Democritus and Aristotle to even some biblical passages mentioning a time before the moon was around.
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you think about it. It pops up in all sorts of different cultures, too. Imagine civilizations thousands of years ago looking up at the night sky and there's no moon.
Yeah.
Really makes you think about how we perceive what's normal, right?
Totally. It really does make you wonder what the sky would look like then. And why was this idea of a moonless Earth so common back then? What was it about the moon that made its absence so significant to these ancient cultures?
Well, some say that whenever the moon showed up, it had a huge impact on Earth, maybe even shaped life as we know it.
Now we're talking. And while we're on the subject of mind-blowing ideas, the source we're looking at also brings up this theory of the moon as an artificial construct. Like it's not a natural satellite, but something that was put there, maybe even hollow. John Lear, who's got some pretty out there ideas, is all over this one.
It's definitely a fringe theory, but there are some curious things. The Apollo missions, for example, they picked up these moonquakes. And when something hits the lunar surface, the moon, get this, rings like a bell. Some folks think that points to a hollow interior.
Wait, the moon rings like a bell? That's insane. But does that mean it has to be hollow? Couldn't there be other reasons?
Oh, yeah, for sure. There could be natural geological formations that could do the same thing. It's just one of those things that makes you wonder, what else could be under the surface?
Totally, like a giant cosmic mystery.
Yeah.
Now, the podcast episode also talked about something called mascons. These are areas on the moon with higher density that pull more strongly. What's the deal with those and how do they fit into this artificial moon idea?
Mascons are definitely real, and we've mapped them out. But because they're there, it's led some people to think that there might be artificial stuff, maybe even technology, hidden under the surface. Some even say that these mascons are proof of some kind of advanced engineering.
Whoa, are they talking like giant engines or something?
Yeah.
Tech that controls the moon's movements.
It's a wild idea, but again, totally speculative. But here's the thing. Mascons actually do affect things here on Earth. They influence our tides and maybe even other things going on with our planet. They're not just abstract concepts. They're actually doing stuff.
That's crazy to think about. It's like these faraway objects actually have a hand in our everyday lives. And since we're talking about the moon's influence, the episode mentioned something about titanium being found in high concentrations on the moon. How does that fit into all of this?
Another piece of the puzzle, right? Titanium is super strong and light, and we use it in all sorts of tech here on Earth, especially in aerospace. Finding so much of it on the moon makes you wonder how it got there. Some people think it might be evidence of advanced engineering or construction, which would support the artificial moon idea.
So we've got these ancient stories about a time before the moon, the whole moonquake thing, the mystery of mascons, and now this titanium thing. It's like all these little hints pointing towards something bigger, something we haven't figured out yet.
Exactly. And maybe the wildest idea of all is this soul recycling center concept.
All right, now that's what I call a deep dive. Tell me more about this soul recycling thing.
The idea basically says that the moon acts like a place where souls go after death. Then, maybe, it sends them back to Earth for reincarnation. It's definitely a bold concept, but it's not new. Different spiritual traditions have talked about this for ages.
It does sound like something out of science fiction, but it's got this mystical side too. Is there anything in old texts or beliefs that supports this idea?
Well, the episode brings up the Tibetan Wheel of Life, or Pavachakra. It's like a picture that shows the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth in Tibetan Buddhism. And here's the interesting part. In a lot of these pictures, Buddha is shown pointing to the moon as a way to escape this cycle.
That is a super interesting connection. It's like the moon is being presented as this gateway to something beyond our earthly experience. So if we entertain this whole soul recycling thing, does that mean it's a good thing? Or could it be something, a little darker?
That's the big question, right? Is it a system that helps souls evolve, or does it keep them stuck in the reincarnation cycle? The episode we're looking at doesn't really say, so we're left to wonder.
And to add to the intrigue, the episode talks about John Lear, the guy we mentioned before. He claims he used remote viewing to track a soul to the moon after death, which, if you believe it, really supports the recycling idea.
Remote viewing is a tricky thing, though. Whether it's a reliable way to get information is up for debate. It's important to be a little skeptical about stuff like that.
Definitely, we need to be critical thinkers when we're dealing with these unusual theories.
Yeah.
But even if we take the remote viewing thing with a grain of salt, this idea of the moon being involved in the afterlife is still super fascinating. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie, but with roots in old wisdom and spiritual traditions.
Exactly. And sometimes those far out ideas can lead us to unexpected insights and new ways of seeing the universe and our place in it.
And speaking of sci-fi, the podcast actually compared this soul recycling thing to the resurrection ship from the TV show Battlestar Galactica. Might seem like a strange connection, but it makes you think. Are there links between our modern sci-fi and the ancient beliefs about the moon and the afterlife?
I think it's a great question to think about. Maybe our fascination with space travel and aliens is just a modern way of expressing our ancient desire to understand what's beyond our earthly existence.
I really like that way of looking at it. It's like those old myths and beliefs are a part of us, finding new ways to express themselves in our art, literature, even our science.
It reminds us that we're all connected not just to each other, but to something bigger than ourselves. And maybe the moon, with all its mysteries and its influence on us, holds the key to some of the universe's biggest secrets.
It's wild how we started talking about the moon and this whole soul recycling thing, and now we're digging into ancient human history. Speaking of which, those Venus figurines we mentioned earlier, I'm really curious about those. These ancient statues, some going back like tens of thousands of years, they really make you rethink what we think we know about early humans, you know?
Absolutely. Picture this. You're wandering around Europe tens of thousands of years ago, and you come across these intricately carved figures, some made out of mammoth ivory. These aren't just some scratches on a cave wall. These are 3D representations of people, usually women, sometimes with detailed clothes and hairstyles.
I know, right?
Yeah.
The skill it took to create these figures, especially with whatever tools they had back then, it's mind-blowing. It really challenges that whole idea of primitive humans from the Paleolithic era.
For sure. The Venus figurines show a level of craftsmanship and artistic expression that's unexpected for people living so far back in time. It makes you think they had a more complex culture than just surviving in a tough environment.
So what do researchers think they used these figures for? Were they religious things? Fertility symbols? Or something totally different?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Archaeologists and anthropologists have been stumped for decades. There are lots of theories, but no one knows for sure. Some say they were fertility symbols, representing nature's abundance and the importance of women back then. Others think they were religious icons, maybe goddesses or spiritual beings.
It's almost like they're sending us a message, a glimpse into the minds of our ancient ancestors. And the fact they've been found all over Europe, from France to Russia, suggests these beliefs were pretty widespread and important to them.
Exactly. They give us a peek into a world we can hardly imagine, a world where humans were forming complex societies, belief systems, and artistic traditions.
And it's fascinating how these Venus figurines, even though they're from so long ago, connect to our modern-day fascination with the moon. They both represent that human desire to understand the unknown, the mysteries we haven't solved yet.
That's a great point. Both the moon and these ancient figures push us to broaden our perspectives on history, what humans are capable of, and the sheer vastness of the universe and all its possibilities.
So we've gone from the moon, way up there in space, to these ancient artworks here on Earth. We've talked about old texts, mind-bending theories, and objects that make us question everything we thought we knew about the past. What does it all mean? How do we even start to make sense of all these ideas and possibilities?
Well, it's important to remember we're dealing with a lot of speculation here. We're stepping into the unknown, where solid evidence is hard to come by, but that doesn't mean we should just ignore it.
I agree. It's about embracing the mystery, the wonder of it all. Even if we don't get all the answers, the journey itself is pretty amazing.
Absolutely. It's about asking questions, questioning what we think we know, and considering ideas that might seem crazy at first. It's about expanding our minds and being open to the idea that there's a lot more to the universe than we currently understand.
The source material we've been looking at definitely pushes the boundaries of conventional thinking, suggesting that the moon might be much more than just a celestial body. It proposes that it could be an artificial construct, a potential way station for souls, even a key player in the cycle of reincarnation. It's a lot to take in, but it's definitely sparked some fascinating discussions and insights.
It certainly has. And while we may not buy into every theory presented, the real value is in engaging with these ideas, exploring what they could mean, and allowing them to challenge our preconceived notions about the cosmos and our place within it.
That's a really important point, I think. It's not about blindly believing everything, but about being open to new possibilities, new ways of seeing the world and the universe. It's about nurturing that sense of wonder and curiosity, just like those ancient humans who looked up at the moon and created those amazing Venus figurines.
Exactly. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from this whole deep dive, to never stop questioning, never stop exploring, and never lose that childlike sense of awe and wonder about the mysteries all around us.
I love that. And speaking of mysteries, there's one we haven't even touched on yet. One of the most intriguing questions the podcast brings up. What would it mean for us if the moon really was a soul recycling center? It's a question that goes deep into spirituality, philosophy, the very nature of existence.
It's a profound question, that's for sure. And it's one we'll be diving into as we wrap up our exploration of the moon's mysteries.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into this whole soul recycling center idea.
We've been through a lot, huh? Ancient stories, artificial moons, Venus figurines.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Mm-hmm.
But before we wrap up, we got to address the elephant in the room, that big question we left hanging. If this soul recycling thing was actually real, what would it mean for us? Not just as a cool concept, but for how we see life, death, everything.
It's a question that takes us beyond science and into philosophy, spirituality, even morality. So let's just assume for a second that the moon is this way station for souls.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Souls going up there after they die, maybe getting a cosmic tune-up, then sent back down to Earth for another round. But why? What's the purpose of it all?
That's where it gets really interesting. Some people believe it's all about spiritual growth, like we're learning lessons over many lifetimes, working our way towards some higher level of being. It's almost like Earth is a giant cosmic school, and we're here to learn.
Like we're here to master certain skills or gain wisdom through experience. So the moon's like the teacher, guiding us through this huge cosmic curriculum.
Exactly. And if you take it a step further, maybe the moon's cycles, those phases we see, represent the stages of this soul journey, waxing and waning, just like life and death.
But there's also the flip side. What if this recycling isn't so nice? What if it's more like a trap, soul stuck in a loop, unable to get out? That's a bit of a bummer.
That's a valid point, and it brings up the question of free will. Are we choosing to come back, or is it all predetermined? Is there a way to escape this cycle, like Buddha pointing to the moon in the Pavachakra?
I know. That image keeps coming back to me. Like the moon holds the secret to breaking free, but we have to find the way ourselves.
And who knows, maybe those ancient civilizations that talked about a time before the moon were onto something. Maybe they understood this cycle in a way that we're just starting to grasp now.
So we're back to those ancient texts as clues. It's like we've come full circle in this deep dive.
We have, and it just shows how connected knowledge is. Ancient wisdom, modern theories, science fiction, they all play a part in how we understand the universe and our place in it.
We've been balancing skepticism and open-mindedness throughout this episode. How do we, as listeners, process this kind of information, especially when it's so different from what we normally hear?
I think the key is to approach it with both curiosity and a critical eye. Don't just believe everything, but don't dismiss it all either. Ask questions, consider different viewpoints, and in the end, draw your own conclusions.
Like, we've got all these puzzle pieces, but it's up to us to figure out how they fit together. And who knows, maybe we'll uncover something totally unexpected.
And that's the exciting part of exploring, right? The journey is just as important as the destination.
So as we wrap up our exploration of the moon as a potential soul recycling center, what's the one thing you hope listeners take away from this conversation?
If there's one thing I'd want people to remember, it's this. Keep looking up at the night sky with a sense of wonder. The moon, whether it's a celestial body, a spiritual symbol, or something else entirely, has fascinated us for centuries. Who knows what secrets we'll discover as we keep exploring?
Well said. And until our next deep dive, keep your minds open to all the possibilities out there.